This episode is brought to you with support from PerfectDailyGrind.com. Perfect Daily Grind, your source for coffee education, articles, videos, and more, from the farm to the cup.
If you've ever seen the words Café de Colombia on a bag of green coffee or heard of a man with the name Juan Valdez, you may be familiar with today's guest on the show. Velez is the CEO of what is called the National Federation of Coffee Growers of Colombia, which represents roughly 540,000 producers in Colombia. The Federation has a rich history in Colombian coffee, which we don't really have the time to review in depth today. In short, the Federation was established by coffee producers for coffee producers as early as 1920. A lot has happened since then. Today, the Federation is held in high regard for their success within the coffee sector in economics and science. Today, Mr. Velez joins the conversation on the economic sustainability of coffee and the current coffee price crisis. I want to get a little bit of your personal story out to our podcast listeners so they can get an idea of who you are as a person before they start to understand some of the topics that we're going to cover. So can you tell us a little bit about your coffee story? How did you end up where you are today?
Well, I'm coming from the coffee growing area of Colombia. My grandfather had a coffee farm. My father had a coffee farm. When I was at high school, we used to pick coffee with my brothers, and we had fun. And even we got paid by our dad for doing such a tremendous job of picking good berries. And then I came to Bogota. I studied economics, went to England, and I had a master's degree in business. Came back to Colombia and joined the Federation in 1985. I initially worked here in Bogota in the commercial area. I went to our office in New York for a trainee as a young executive. Then I went to our Tokyo office that serves the Asia market for almost 4 years. Came back and I had a couple of breaks from the Federation. One was in 1994, when I went as ambassador, first Colombian ambassador to Malaysia, being a very young guy. I came back to the Federation 2 years later, started the specialty program of the Federation, then went back to Tokyo for another 4 years. Came back as a commercial manager of the Federation. I decided to prove myself and my life out of the Federation in 2008, and then 2011 was appointed as ambassador to the United Arab Emirates, also first Colombian ambassador. I served for 3 years in Abu Dhabi and then went to Tokyo as Colombian ambassador to Japan. And in 2015, I was called to represent the coffee growers as the CEO of the Colombian Coffee Federation.
Wow. You've done a lot of travel, it sounds like, in your life.
Yes, you bet.
Quite a bit. Well, awesome. Thanks for sharing your story. I'm excited to get into a little bit about the FNC so we can see economic sustainability from the perspective of the FNC. So let's start with some history. When was the FNC established and why was it established?
FNC was established in 1927 by a bunch of coffee growers that saw themselves the need to found an association to try to improve the livelihood of the coffee grower farmers. And ever since, that's been our goal and our aim for almost 92 years now. Yet, the way that coffee spread out through Colombia and the way that coffee became a very important crop, or the most important crop of Colombia, the Federation became a very powerful unit by means of charging a tax on the coffee exports and keeping that in a fund to do social benefits for the coffee growers.
Okay.
The Federation became such an institution that initially started to provide the public goods for the coffee growing areas, such as electricity, roads, schooling, bridges, healthcare, um, small hospitals in the coffee growing area. At the point that the federation was considered a state within the state, that is the coffee growing federation.
Is it fair to call those programs that the tax money would be used for? Are those called extension programs, or is that not the word for it?
Yeah, today the federation provides four main services to the coffee growers. One, what we call the purchase guarantee, which is all coffee that is produced in Colombia will be purchased at the best possible price in cash, the closest to the coffee growers as possible, and during the 365 days a year. That means that the coffee grower itself has not any concern about where or how to sell and what would be the price of their coffee. And that sounds not very relevant up until you come to areas or to crops that have no such a service. Then the grower of tomatoes or whatever it is has to go to the main city and try to sell the products. By the time his product is right, everything is at the same time as an offer, and then he or she might not find a buyer for the product. That doesn't happen to coffee.
I see.
So that's the first service. Number two service is research and development. We have probably the most renowned service of research in the world and the most sophisticated. We call it CENI Cafe. So all technology and all new advances in coffee are created, studied, developed, and or implemented in CENI Cafe. Then we have more than 1,400 extensionists, which are agronomists that take all this knowledge of CENI Cafe and all these recommendations and bring it back to the coffee growing areas, into the coffee communities. They work with the coffee growers, they teach the coffee growers, they go hand in hand to provide them with the knowledge and with the latest technologies that we develop. And the fourth is the promotion and advertising of Colombian coffee all through the world. Those are the main four services that today the Federation provides to the coffee grower.
We've covered pretty well what the relationship of the FNC is to producers through all these programs. My next question is, what is your perspective? What is the FNC's relationship to the rest of the coffee world?
Well, Jesse, we've been very active in the international community. Although Colombia is not the largest coffee grower in the world, I think Colombia is well known and well renowned for being one of the leaders in the coffee world community. Ever since the coffee agreement started in 1962, there's been a very close relationship between the coffee growers community. And in that, we meet our friends from other countries, and we normally stay very much in touch with all of them. As Colombia, we promoted the first coffee growers forum that was held in Medellin 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in that forum, the idea was to gather all the coffee growing community to talk about the issues and the topics that concern all of us.
I had the pleasure actually of attending that event, and I got to experience that firsthand. Not just that, but Colombia for the first time, and also some FNC farms out there, coffee farms. So it was quite an experience. So I had a little bit of an idea of the international context that the FNC has. And I'm glad you brought up the World Coffee Producers Forum because I believe there's another one coming up pretty soon in Brazil. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. July 10th and 11th, the second coffee growers forum, producers forum will be held in Campinas, Brazil. There we will discuss the latest about coffee that are only sad news, unfortunately. But we will have the opportunity to discuss among ourselves, and more important, we have ever since we conceived the Coffee Growers Forum, has been thinking that there should be a place we can gather not only coffee producers but the whole coffee community to discuss the issues and the topics that are relevant to all of us.
I like that you brought up, you called it sad news, and the very real news that the industry is facing is the current coffee price crisis. My next question to you is, why do you believe we are in a crisis today?
Jesse, is definitely, well, if one has to be very purist, you will have to say, well, Brazil had a very large crop last year, and that put a little bit of surplus to the whole world supply, thus bringing the coffee prices down. Yet that is a very, very academic look into the coffee world. I think there are many more things happening behind the curtains that are bringing prices to this level. One of them is the big participation of the investors' funds in the coffee market, in the New York's ICE coffee. They've been holding a very large or extremely large short position, meaning that they've been selling futures of coffee for the last almost 27 months. And now they are accounting for a huge position that has been, of course, based on this larger supply of coffee in Brazil, given the market a much deeper trend into the downward side. Therefore, we are now at under 90 cents, which is something that one cannot imagine that could happen in the coffee world, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
I have a few quick questions for you regarding what you just said. I do hear the academic side of the explanation quite often, but you also brought up an economic reality outside of the surplus from Brazil. And it sounds, economics is not my strong suit. Can you explain that?
This is something that we've been preaching already for almost 3 years, that the coffee community should work together hand in hand as a chain that must be and had to be sustainable for the future. Therefore, we cannot see each other as two parts. You're a buyer and I'm a seller. You are on one side of the river and I'm on the other side of the river. No, we are all connected and we are all the same in the same boat. So what we have to is and this is our main theory back, is that we have to be co-responsible. That we want to bring the world co-responsibility into this game, saying that we need to take care of the next step of the chain if we want the whole chain to be successful and sustainable for the future. So it's a very selfish position to stay and say, no, there's a surplus and therefore prices must be at a point where they are now, that they don't cover the cost of production. Thus, whereas the industry is doing well, where the coffee consumption is still going up, where the prices of a cup of coffee worldwide is still maintaining, here at this side of the world, where we produce the coffee, we are not earning and we are not getting paid enough to cover our cost of production and our cost of living for ourselves and our families. Therefore, Jesse, this is what is more complicated. This has already trespassed the point of an economic crisis, and it's becoming a humanitarian crisis. If you go to countries in Central America, in South America, and even in Colombia, people are abandoning their farms, looking for something else that can provide the income. People are doing whatever they can in order to complete the income to have enough money to feed themselves. So we are in a very delicate position. And again, this doesn't sound very logical because the coffee world itself is providing enough money to the industry that the industry could pay enough to the coffee growers to the point that they can cover the cost of production plus some profitability.
What would you say, or what do you believe the FNC's role is through all of this?
Our role is always the same. Our role is try to look for and strive for the well-being of the coffee growers. And ever since I came as CEO of the Federation, I always said that we have to bring back the profitability to the coffee world, or else we have to go out of coffee, and people will start going out of coffee. And we just saw the latest news from Colombia. In the last 3 years, we have lost already 60,000 hectares of coffee that have gone to some other products.
Wow.
And this will keep going and going and going unless, again, the industry, because nowadays a coffee grower has not enough money to feed their family. They look into us or into the government. And it's been the governments, not only of Colombia, but I spoke to Guatemala and Honduras and Peru, and it's been the governments of poor countries that are taking money out of their budgets to try to support an industry, the coffee growers, while you have an industry that is making tons of money and is making a lot of profits in a very healthy atmosphere, because the coffee consumption, again, is growing to the point of between 1.5 to 2%, which is a marvelous performance for any commodity worldwide.
Yeah, that information is really helpful to really think about the full picture. I guess a follow-up question would be, I know that some people would say from an academic perspective that producers pulling out of coffee is a sort of automatic correction or a built-in correction to the surplus. Have you heard people say that? And what is your response to that statement?
Jesse, I heard, of course, and I've been called crazy, lunatic for stating what I just said, that we should be looking ourselves not as two parts of an equation, but more like a chain itself. What I can answer is that, first, we are not growing wheat, we are not growing soybean, we are not growing maize, in the sense that this is not every cultivar that you can just take out and grow the next, and in 3 months, if it is not profitable, you change for another. This is a long-term business. You plant a coffee tree, and it will take 2 years to bear fruits, and it will stay there for the next 20 years. So asking a grower to take out the coffee and then go back to coffee is almost impossible. That's number one. That's number one. Number two, economic theory works nicely if you are producing nails or you are producing chairs, and you can switch, and you're going to close your factory and go somewhere else or start a new business. We are talking to human beings. We are talking about poor communities. We are talking, in the case of Colombia, of land where only coffee is the only alternative. There are some others but they are not legal, and that's what we don't want, and that's what we want. We are always also warning the world that don't push the coffee growers and the the communities to start growing illegal crops. Keep them in legal business, but we need to pay them at least the cost of production plus some profitability.
What is the average cost of production? Do you have that number available so we can compare it to the current price?
Yeah, Jesse, I guess the cost of production in Colombia will be between 140 in terms of US dollars per cent, 140 to 145.
Oh, wow. So we're talking.
And then again, that is not that I'm asking, because I've been also called a fool, because if you take prices of coffee in the late 1980s, and you project that with the inflation of the U.S., the same pound of coffee at the price that it was in the late 80s would be now between $3 to $3.50. So I'm not saying that the industry should pay $3.50. And again, I've been called a fool by not asking that. I'm only asking industry. And I've been in front, Jesse, I've been in front of the main CEOs of the coffee industry, asking them, please commit with me that you won't pay under the cost of production. It's that it makes no sense that while the industry is making a lot of money, they are still asking us to sell our coffee under our cost of production.
It sounds like from an academic perspective, right? It's kind of like you said before, there's a pervasive academic perspective. And if those CEOs hold that perspective and don't see the human element.
Exactly. And then when you asked me about the thoughts of the academics saying that no, you should go out of coffee, and I said, well, what else can we grow in the steepest mountains of Colombia? And I said that, well, we don't want, and it would be a shame that the industry would be pushing the coffee growers to grow illegal crops.
It sounds like, Mr. Roberto, that your goal is to change people's minds, is to change their minds about how they think.
Jesse, I think we have to go to a next level of the economics, where yes, supply and demand is important, but sustainability is more important. If you go out there and you ask and you talk to people and you talk to the centennials and you talk to millennials and the new generations, the way they conceive the world is a world that is sustainable. But sustainability has three dimensions. One is, of course, the one that everybody is fan of it, and we all should care, which is the one that has to be to do with the environment. So the environmental dimension is very important. The second pillar is the social dimension. We don't want children working. We need to have an equality of gender and opportunities. We have to give people the right to associate and to do things. We have to give people opportunity for studying and healthcare. But that's the second dimension. And the third dimension is something that nobody cares, which is the economic dimension. So yes, environmental is nice, and the coffee grower must take care of the environment and the water and the trees and the birds. And we have to give every time more space to the women who are in coffee, and we are doing so. But yet we have to give the coffee grower the fair price for the product, or else we are not a sustainable business. And what we are preaching and what we are inviting the coffee community is to become the first industry that can claim itself to be a truly sustainable industry for the future. And that we should work together to ease the problems of the whole chain. Not only prices, yes, because today is prices, but then will be climate change, and then there will be the new generation in coffee, and then we have on and on and on and on issues that should tackle together should we want to be a really sustainable industry for the future.
Hmm. I see. And when you say a fair price for producers, you really mean a profitable price, a price that.
Well, yeah, Jesse. What I mean as a fair price is something that that the coffee grower can cover the cost of production and have a normal profitability. That would be the least that we can offer them.
Yeah, there's so much here, and I'm happy that you're giving me a very clear perspective of your mission, and it sounds like the mission that is shared at the FNC. And we have now moved into the topic naturally of economic sustainability, which was the direction we plan to go. So I do want to say this isn't the first coffee price crisis in coffee history. Do you think, as a trend, do you think that coffee has been economically sustainable in the past, or is this something that's never been achieved?
No, coffee was a sustainable product when we work under the ICA, the International Coffee Agreement, that ran from 1962 to 1989. It was conceived and created by President Kennedy, where the price of coffee was within a range that was profitable for the coffee growers. There was an agreement between the coffee importers and the coffee exporters country to say how much coffee will flow from the producers to the consumer world. And all that agreed, the coffee growers countries split the quota among themselves, and the export started, and the flow of coffee was that enough for the industry to grow. And coffee growers were very happy because prices were rewarded and profitable for the business. So the coffee grower, the coffee world knows we can work together and make a feasible business for all of us.
If I remember correctly, based on the history, that agreement was made in a time of crisis. Is that correct? So it was a response to a crisis.
It was not necessarily an agreement on the time of crisis. It was more a U.S. policy. It was more
oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
a geopolitical movement because there was more than a coffee agreement. There was the cocoa agreement, there was the cotton agreement, there was the sugar agreement, there was many of the commodities went under the same or work under the same system, which was actually very clever because it was the way in which the U.S. used to support many of the commodity producing countries. They realized easily that instead of giving money for free and then not receiving anything in change, they could ask the rest of the international community to support the producers of commodities by paying a fair price for the product. So everybody was putting putting money into that, and countries were receiving enough for their commodities. So they didn't need to ask the U.S., "Can you help me here? Can you support me there? Can you?" So it was a real clever move.
So we discussed economic sustainability. We've now discussed that agreement, which is important to understanding the coffee price historically. And you answered the question if you thought coffee's been economically sustainable in the past. What do you suggest are solutions for us today? I know that you've spoken about working together, not acting as two separate parts, but as one chain. What kind of practical application do you think that suggests for the industry?
Well, the industry should look into several aspects of the coffee world today. The way that we are moving with this crisis are bringing many of the coffee growers communities to go out of coffee. And you just said it. The economics will tell you the weaker should go and the stronger should remain. And the market is the market. And in that sense, we are losing something that is beautiful and is a treasure in the coffee world, which is the diversity in the coffee world. Coffee is produced all over more than 50 countries around the world with crop profiles differently, with attributes that are unique. We are losing that. That's number one. Number two, the industry is concentrated production in those that are stronger, and yet you're running the risk that we are, by means of our nature, located in the tropical countries, in the tropical belt, in the tropical world. And the tropics are the ones that are suffering the most with the climate change.
Hmm.
So yes, you concentrate your production in one or two or five countries. And if by means of what is going on in the world, and we know it will come, Jesse, you will remember me. It will come one day. I don't know when.
Hmm.
A big problem with the weather in one of the major producing countries. And if the industry relies everything on those, and it comes some disaster, with that disaster, we may run out of coffee. And that is the worst scenario. I tell you, that is the worst scenario for coffee because then coffee prices will go, I don't know, $10, $20 per pound. And then we will have consumers that will say, no, I'm not going to pay $10 or $15 for a cup of coffee. I'm going to move to juice or whatever drink it is. And then we have killed the goose of the golden eggs, which is the growth of the coffee consumption worldwide.
Hmm.
So this is why we say we better work together to avoid those problems in the future.
Mr. Roberto, I thank you for coming on the show and discussing these critical topics in the industry today from your perspective and from the perspective of the F&C as you represent it. I have a closing question for you. It's one of my favorite questions to ask our guests because it helps our listeners know what they can do, how they can respond to such issues in the industry. So, we have listeners from all over the world listening to this episode. What advice would you give our listeners concerning the coffee price crisis? What can they do as consumers, baristas, roasters to make a positive impact on this issue?
Well, Jesse, I just appealed to the coffee consumers to ask the industry, what are you doing with the coffee growers? And we want the baristas to say we would like to maintain the diversity in the coffee world as we can prepare our coffees the best way possible. And if we have raw materials that are different from all over the world, then we can assemble what is the best coffee that we can offer to our consumers. And to the industry, I just want to tell them, come on, sit together with us, and let's do something together, and let's move, and let's prove that the coffee world is able to assemble itself as the first industry that can claim sustainability all around the world.
That seems like a very good motivator, a very good goal to have as an industry. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. And is there any life advice that you would like to share with our listeners? Anything that you've learned through all your years? It can be coffee related or unrelated to coffee. Any advice that you feel is...
Well, there's probably one last thing that I would like to say, that regardless of the coffee prices, regardless of the coffee situation today, Colombia is working on a plan with the federation that we call 100-100. We call 100 because it is designed to be completed when the federation becomes an 100-year-old institution. It means 2027. And it's the other 100 is that because we will be working to become the first country that can offer the world and the international community a coffee that's 100% sustainable. We've been working on the three pillars very strongly. We have set up our goals and our measurements to be able to claim not only that we produce the best coffee in the world quality-wise, but that best coffee is supported by a fully sustainable industry that is growing the coffee.
Wow. That's a great goal to have. And I hope you all have the best in that endeavor.
Thank you.
So,
thank you, Jesse.
So, Mr. Roberto, thank you for joining us on the show.
Jesse, thank you very much, and all the best for the coffee podcast listeners.
You may have heard it in the news recently. Coffee futures have been reported at 123.70 for December of 2019. I've already seen posts on social media suggesting the coffee price crisis is over. My conversation with Mr. Velez was back in May of 2019 when prices were at 104.60 but had opened at 91.70. So here we are, on this side of things, trying to judge for ourselves if a crisis is over just because a number changed. I want to clarify, I'm by no means a futures trader. The world of economics is not my strong suit. The whole reason I have guests on the show with different sets of expertise is to learn from them, to let them speak their minds, to discern for myself what I think about these matters. I've been trying to do so without an agenda, but we all have our biases. I hope you understand I don't agree with everything my guests have said on the show during this series. I've taken an intentional step back to let this series be what it is, a discussion of perspectives. This series is not for the purpose of uncovering deep controversy or pressuring people in power to change their ways. I've not held a heavy hammer of investigative journalism. I've set out to listen. And I hope that doesn't come across as cowardice. Catch us next time for our final episode in our series, and thus the last episode of 2019 from the Coffee Podcast. Reach out to me at hello@thecoffeepodcast.org or find us on our Instagram and website. I'm Jesse Hartman. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, and until next time, happy brewing.